Hi, this is the vlog for July 11th. It's 7-Eleven Day. So I've missed my chance to get a free Slurpee. Not that I needed that much sugar in my life anyway. Uh, what have I done today? Well, I stayed home because it ended up not being quite as warm as I thought it was going to be. I almost took a drive around Lake Sammamish. Just for fun, but I decided I would do that tomorrow because, uh, well, it's supposed to be much hotter, and I just wanted an excuse to be in my car and stay cool with the air conditioning on, and I didn't need to do that today. When this house gets warm, it is impossible to escape the heat, especially now that the downstairs is being completely torn up. Um, the kitchen is gone, uh, and I just feel like I hope they start building soon because they have very little left that they can just take out. Um, and all of the stuff is piled up on the back deck. We'll see how it goes. The new kitchen is going to be fantastic, and the new dining room is going to actually get used as opposed to the old dining room. That'll be nice. Um, I think we've also come to an agreement to leave the TV in the same room that it's been in, which will make it impossible for us to watch television and eat at the same time, which actually seems like a really good idea. Um, but what did I do today? Since I've only said what I didn't do mostly. Well, I actually managed to be productive. I think I talked either yesterday or the day before about sort of getting distracted by playing games. I played a little bit of League of Legends, a very little bit. I've spent most of my free time today writing notes for my campaign setting. I feel very productive. I made up a lot of names. I've gone over this before, I think, but coming up with fantasy names is incredibly difficult because I don't want to just come up with a random slew of words. I have too much of a background in English to do that. So what I try and do is I try and create names that evoke a different kind of name while remaining unique. Um, so, for example, um, here's an example. There's a character in my book named uh, Priscosia Datchet. She goes by Pris because that's a lot easier to say, but the name Priscosia actually comes from Precosia, um, which was a name of a character a friend of mine had, which was in turn based on the word precocious. Precosia was a very young character, and so being precocious was sort of her identifying feature. And I thought to myself, well, a character like that would eventually grow up. What kind of a person would they be? And Pris is very much somebody who got through life making all of her own decisions and working hard to do what she wanted to do. And it reflects in her sort of nonchalance in telling other people what to do. She's the bosun on the ship that is central to the story, and she's one of the major characters, although not one of the primary ones. But her last name, Datchet, just came from, I don't even know where I came up with that. I just liked, I think I liked the word dash, but I didn't like the way DASHET or DASHIT looked on the page. So I changed the SH sound for a CH sound, Datchet, and it looks better and sounds better when you say it out loud, in my opinion. So believe me when I tell you that it took me weeks. Actually, I think it was a period of several months from where I came up with the concept to where I actually had a name for that character. The last 2 months before I actually started work on my book was just coming up with names. I'd had character concepts and even names for locations settled for a year before I started writing. but I didn't give all the characters names. I'm still not very good at describing characters because I have an image of them so firmly etched in my head that it's hard for me to remember. Other people don't have that, and I need to include that. And I'm sure an editor would be able to point out all the places where I could do some describing and do myself a favor in describing. But that's sort of on the back burner right now. Right now I'm focused on Dinostria. And in fact, I'm having a much easier time naming stuff in Dinostria because the audience is like not... I don't have to appeal to as wide an audience. I just have to appeal to a group of friends who will probably get some of the references that I'm making. To give you an idea, so the four nations, each of which is comprised of multiple kingdoms, the four major nations in Dinostria are the Republic of Kordinos, the Somari Commonwealth, the Icon Union, and Ryukina. Now, the first three have a word in the title that very much identifies them governmentally. The Republic of Kordinos is often just called the Republic. And as a republic, you can tell that it is a somewhat democratically elected government, which means that its kingdoms are actually not the creators of law. Kings are actually lords who control various specific parts of the republic, but the actual like lawmaking group is a parliament, much like in Britain. And in fact, all the naming conventions in Kordinos are taken from British English. So instead of Exeter, I have Rexeter. Instead of what else did I have? I have a few Scarlant, which was like a weird variant of Scarborough. There's another one that's called Exalum, which is sort of another play on Exeter, come to think of it. But at least Exalum and Rexeter sound pretty different. I've also spelled Rexeter very unusually for how it sounds. So it will look different when written out. Moving along to the Commonwealth is inspired by the colonies of Britain, which achieved independence within the last century or so. So, with one big exception, because the United States of America was a colony of Britain. So one of the colonies of the Commonwealth is called Ark-America. And then because Australia was yet another colony, there's another Commonwealth colony called Australia. And then the rest of the colonies have some, like, instead of Guinea, I have Guinea. And then a few just easy to remember. There's two islands called the Twin Fish Islands, and then another group of islands called the Triclops. These are names that I created just so they would be easier to remember. And that's a big thing, is that if you create a name that's easy to remember and fairly unique, that makes it easier for its identity to be kept in mind by players. Ryukina, you will note, was the only one of the four nations that didn't have any sort of extra identifier like Republic or Commonwealth or Union. Ryukina's thing that identifies it is that it has an Asian naming theme, specifically Japanese, although the three kingdoms, which are called the Veil of Three Kingdoms, are both a reference to Chinese history and also are more closely Chinese names. So the three kingdoms are Ninshido, which has actually been renamed Ryukina and is sort of the most influential of these nation members, states, whatever you want to call them. And then there's also Honshu, which is a halfling dynasty that became part of this union of three kingdoms. I shouldn't say union because that will get you confused with the Icon Union. And then the third is, I just came up with a name today finally. It's called Zudonbu, which is where all the animal people live. And that was actually a portmanteau of the word zoo and the a combination of the Japanese word for animal and the Chinese word for animal. The Japanese word for animal, I believe, is dobu, something along those lines, or dobutsen, or dobutsu. Dobutsu sounds like it might be the one. And then the Chinese word started with dong, and I just took the don sound and added it to the dobu sound. So zu don bu. Ta-da! And so hopefully that zoo at the front makes people think of animals if they have an English background. But it also has that sort of Asian style of pronunciation, so it will be associated with the Asian. And in fact, the Asian named countries are on the eastern part of the map, further sort of grounding it in what we understand of the real world. The icon union is sort of unique because I use the word union because of the European Union, and the icon union itself is very much the Mediterranean location. The Mediterranean I picked specifically because of Greece, its proximity to Egypt, as well as a number of Renaissance countries. The Mediterranean is a place where we get a lot of our ancient storytelling mythology, especially all of the creatures that have grown out of Greek mythology, like the Gorgon, the Chimera, the Manticore, which just means man-eater, but has come to represent a winged lion with a human-like face and a scorpion tail. These are all things that were created in the minds of ancient Greeks. Actually, the Manticore might come from somewhere else, but things like the Hydra and the what's another one? Scylla. A lot of these monsters were singular. Scylla and Charybdis were a pair of monstrous beings that guarded a famous strait that was difficult to sail through. The term stuck between a rock and a hard place is thought to possibly come from between Scylla and Charybdis, which was the narrow place you had to navigate through to avoid being pulled under by either a living whirlpool, in Charybdis's case, or Scylla, which was the upper torso of a naked woman atop 3 wolf heads, beneath which countless snakes formed her lower body. Yeah, you don't want to get close to that. So, the Mediterranean I associate with monsters and danger and sort of a wild lifestyle when you think of characters like Jason and the Argonauts, or Odysseus, or Achilles, who was this great warrior and went on many campaigns and was famous for conquering much of the Trojans before eventually being killed when his ankle was hit. Whatever. But that idea of mythology and danger, I thought, was a big... And I didn't want to just do Greece. So I have Greece as a major sort of inspiration, but then I also take into account a lot of other Mediterranean cultures, like the Moors, or, a bunch of northern African nations that were instrumental in the development of that region. There's a group of desert dwellers that are based off of Arab culture. By sort of using real world influence, you're able to create things that people will remember. If you use certain names to describe things, and those names have a lot in common with the culture that you're emulating or inspired by, that helps players keep that stuff in mind. And that's something that I always thought a lot of fantasy had a problem with. Lord of the Rings, for all of its faults, and I'm not a big fan of Lord of the Rings, a lot of its names are drawn from English and especially Scandinavian mythology that has grounding in the real world and is sort of based on real world word structure, which is, obvious because Tolkien was a big word guy. He invented languages for his books. On the other hand, Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, these don't have as many sort of realistic sounding words, and so you get lost trying to keep up with which elves are the Kaganestri versus the Sylvanestri. You know, what's the what's the difference between Tachesis and Paladine? All this crap. So yeah, I feel very good about what I've been working on today. And I've talked for 15 minutes now, so I'm going to cut it off now, and I will talk more about what I've been doing tomorrow. And until then, I'm Eric Spornitz, and tomorrow will be better.